Hello there. Welcome to this presentation, which will cover Module H from your textbook, which really centers on bringing instructional delivery to life, utilizing it in a different way that's more immersive for the student and a little bit more discovery based. By the end of this section, I hope that you as an instructor will be able to master these 4 learning outcomes. So you've selected and designed or recreated instructional units that incorporate some of the techniques that we're going to talk about. You then understand how to connect the effect of this different teaching practice with student learning and success. You identify the instructional units in your lesson plans that might maybe be best suited for an experiential design. And then finally, and of course, maybe most importantly, is design the correct assessments that measure that student learning to see if it's been effective. So let's get to each of our main themes here. So first we want to focus on you as an instructor designing the instructional units that result in these 3 things that are covered in Module H. Number 1, students that acquire knowledge. So we've created instructional outlines that promote an experiential learning concept. Second, we've created meaning for the student, or the opportunity, maybe more accurately, the opportunity for a student to have meaning to the things that they've learned in a paradigm that a student relates to themselves. And then finally, they take the newly acquired knowledge and the meaning that they are generating and transferring that through their own lens to solving a problem or discovering a new skill that really relates to them on a deeper, more personal level. And let's take a minute and focus on each of those 3 things and how you might deploy them as an instructor yourself. So first, in the acquisition phase, perhaps your different instructional techniques that you might need to use here. Of course, we could use the traditional direct instructional technique, though this one is somewhat minimized through Module H and maybe doesn't completely clearly align. There is a time in this approach that you do need to establish some baseline concepts and expectations for the students, maybe some key terms that they need to understand. But from there, then hopefully we can quickly move you into using maybe a flipped instructional technique where you give them the assessment first and let them work backwards through the content, and then you explain the key areas that they failed to master at the end. Or you do some modeling, or a question and discovery, or a case study type approach, or simply some lab experiences. But those final four points there are really centered on trying to get the student to lead the learning in order to acquire the knowledge. Second, then of course, we want for them to create meaning. So through the discovery of the acquisition component here, we hope that students then connect that new knowledge to some kind of meaning. They begin to test a theory. They consider problems or solutions, or maybe identify patterns. And this works exceedingly well whenever you have students. You've created a culture where the students have the freedom to explore their interests as it relates to problems that they find critical to them. And then lastly, bringing this all into full circle is the transfer of that knowledge. So students now, you've created a situation where they acquired the knowledge, they've connected it to some kind of meaning that is important to them, and they apply it to an interest area. So that really, the benefits of this, it brings learning really to life for the student. It allows them to create solutions for real life problems. And almost always, they get deeper knowledge of those connections and understand and create deeper mastery of the key concepts that you're hoping for them to gain through the instructional program. So the teacher now shifts from a knowledge delivery to a facilitator or coach through this type of technique. And it allows for freedom to explore many different avenues, both for the student and for the teacher. And it really creates a situation where the learning is a lot more widespread. So it's a lot broader and it's a lot deeper. And so you get students who really connect those key learning outcomes that you're trying to get them to master on a much, much deeper level. And so ultimately, the thing that really changes about this type of instructional technique is sometimes you'll find that there are very few wrong answers or wrong solutions that students come up with. And you may, for some period of time, allow them to fail briefly. You may allow them to go down a pathway of solutions that, while the premise is correct, the outcome isn't. And so you might have to allow them to fail in order to back them up and then take them down the correct pathway. And you'll find, I think, through that process, that students learn then at a much, much deeper level. So we got to then, if I've convinced you that this is a really, really great instructional approach, then we've got to connect your pedagogical skill set to deploying this. You've got to examine your teaching approaches. You've got to be nimble as an instructor, which, in my mind means you're able to be flexible. It's going to challenge your paradigm. The more authoritarian, direct nature of instruction that's kind of the historical norm in many educational approaches is much, much easier for a teacher to deliver on a day-to-day basis. This will challenge you as an instructor, and it makes you grow as an instructor because it is much less predictable. And it requires a lot more creativity on your part in order to create lesson plans that allow this level of freedom. So you have to have an environment where students can explore learning through a laboratory or active seating or group work or exploration of resources. And you've got to allow them that kind of challenge in order to really bring this type of instructional approach in Module H to life. Now, not all concepts lend themselves to this type of approach. So what I will encourage you to do is select these things very, very carefully. Occasionally, students need much more direct instruction to prepare for this immersive experiential learning activity. So as you revisit your lesson plans, thinking about which lesson plans would lend themselves best to this Module H approach that we're presenting about, think very carefully and think about the key bullets that I have listed here. Is what information do students need to have to be ready to enter this kind of learning experience? Because it's much more self-driven. What scenarios will the students be able to explore on their own and acquire the targeted knowledge? So you can't create a lesson that is already going to be above their head. They need to have some foundational level of knowledge in order to be able to dig into it on their own and then take it the direction that they wish to take it. Next is, what meaning lens will the students likely choose? And do you need to put some kind of guideposts around it so that they don't go too far off in a wrong direction, that gets too far off the pathway that you're trying to lead them to? And then, what are the targeted transfers of knowledge and meaning? Where is it that you want them to go so that you stay focused on the lesson plan and don't get too far off the track, and you keep those main themes recurring? What guidelines do you need then to set to keep the students focused? Is it time guidelines? Are there parameters for which that you want them to explore certain things? And then how are you going to facilitate that learning? Are you going to allow them to work in small groups? Are you going to allow them to select laboratory projects? How exactly are you going to deploy that facilitated learning experience? And then finally, of course, as we circle back to assessment, is what evidence do you need to collect to substantiate that the learning occurred, so that you have the proper assessment technique, so that you can prove that this activity was effective as you wished. So let me give you a very brief example here. Suppose for a minute that you had a group of seniors in an agribusiness class and you really wanted them to study the types of organizational structure that would be critical in running their agribusiness. And you really wanted them to figure out the differences between a number of different pathways, whether it be a sole proprietorship or a partnership or a corporation or a cooperative or a limited liability company. And you could allow the students with those few main avenues that you would wish for them to explore in terms of organizational structure. You would allow them to take those key main themes, and maybe some students would like to explore that organizational structure through a livestock production enterprise, or through a row crop production enterprise, or through an ag retail production enterprise, or perhaps a horticulture production enterprise. So you would allow the students to kind of utilize that lens to then explore those organizational structures on their own. And many of them will likely come to very similar outcomes if they're guided properly and you've allowed them to explore each of them effectively. So as I get you to think about deploying the concepts that are consistent here with Module H, is hopefully we create then finally effective and flexible assessments. It allows for a lot of freedom for the students to explore a lot of topics, but yet funnels them towards a main learning outcome. It's more formative in this nature than summative, so you're going to be assessing them as they go. And of course, clear rubrics set great expectations. And so just a brief word cloud of the benefits of this pedagogical strategy is you're going to have a lot of different things really moving away from the more traditional instructional design. So as I get you to come to your own activity here, I want to present to you the rubric with which I will assess you in your own learning activity. I want you to think about selecting the proper unit, how you will remodel that instructional design, how you will align that content, and then the assessment activity that you will create. Each of those are equally weighted on a 3-point scale, 0 points for needs improvement all the way to 3 full points for exceeding mastery. And each of the benchmarks are clearly outlined here so that you understand what we hope that you will achieve by remodeling the appropriate lesson plan that you've selected. So here's your activity. I wish for you to select a lesson plan, go through some of them that you might have briefly, and I would encourage you to pick one that you have some strength in. Pick one that it's not so difficult for you to think about how you might reposition it for the student. So select that lesson plan from a course that really could use some updating as well and aligns with some learning outcomes that could be more experiential and interactive. Redesign that instructional approach in a manner that includes a lot of the main concepts that we've been talking about here that align with Module H. And it should include some combination of the following. They don't necessarily have to include all 5 of these, but perhaps at least a couple of them in order to make it more live. So maybe a lab activity or a flipped instructional approach or some student-led instruction, something like that, in order to make it more interesting for them. Then next, create an assessment tool that measures that student mastery and does it in a more formative way rather than a more summative way, and that aligns with the student learning outcomes of the section, the course learning outcomes, and of course the program learning outcomes. And if you want to map it all the way to the institutional learning outcomes, that's even better. So as you complete this, I want you to submit this new lesson plan in a Word document, PDF, or Google Doc, and then refer to the attached rubric that I've covered here for scoring guidance. Really quickly, here's one that we've remodeled just briefly, that will show you just briefly. Here's one that has quickly been remodeled to where it's getting you to explore different systems of beef production. It includes a group activity in here that we hope will be more focused for the students to explore on their own. A second one is more of a soil science activity that allows students that maybe have interest in that to be more focused in that manner. Again, references for this section are the Wiggins and McTighe text, the Understanding by Design. It's been very, very valuable. And I want to thank you and wish you the best for happy teaching.